Welcome back. Reckless e-bike, bike, and moped riders in New York City are facing increased enforcement of traffic regulations. To combat riders who disregard traffic laws like running red lights and ignoring stop signs, specialized officers will patrol high traffic areas citywide. In the Bronx, targeted enforcement will take place along key thoroughfares such as Fordham Road, 149th Street, and Tremont Avenue. Here to discuss more is the Bronx and Uptown organizer at the Transportation Alternatives, Anna Berlanga. Anna, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me here.
Of course, like I said, like I told you right before, I've almost been hit by a bike, a scooter, a moped, a timer 20. So I'm very excited to talk about this with you. Let's start off with what are the changes that the NYPD has made in enforcing bike traffic violations?
So this was it was a small change that has a huge impact. So for decades, bike infractions were dealt with like car infractions. You got a ticket that you could pay via mail. Now the change that they made, that the NYPD and Commissioner Tisch made by themselves, was to treat these as criminal summonses. So now it's a criminal infraction to do a small traffic violation.
I think that's very important. Like you said, it's a small change, but it makes a huge impact. And I think, you know, you don't always have to take these massive leaps and bounds, but it's the smaller things that are going to make people think about, you know, think before they violate a regulation. So with that, why are officers now giving criminal summonses instead of regular traffic tickets? We kind of just spoke about that, but can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I really can't speak to what the NYPD and Commissioner Tisch are doing. I'm here to say that I don't know that it's great to treat bicycles differently than treating cars when we know that cars cause a vast majority of the injuries and deaths on our roads.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're able to share with us, what does a C summons mean for riders and how does it differ from a B summons?
So normally traffic, like I said earlier, oh my gosh, I'm getting like tripped up on my words.
No, you're totally fine.
But normally traffic violations, it's just a ticket. So when you get pulled over in a car for a ticket, you mail in your money, pay it online, and you go about your day. So the criminal summons is you have to go to court, wherever the court is in the Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens. You have to lose a day of pay, you have to get a lawyer, and then you have a criminal record. So that criminal summons or the criminal record could have implications for your daily life.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it makes you think before you violate. And so let's talk about the enforcement on areas like Fordham, 149th Street, and Tremont Avenue. Let's talk a little bit about that, maybe why those areas.
So Fordham is the second deadliest road in the city.
Wow.
Fordham, Tremont, and 149th have a lot of conflict. 149th, we've seen 3 cyclists die just on one corner alone, so 149th and Brook Avenue, for example. These are one of the only places in the Bronx where you can go east to west from river to river, so to speak. And so it's high conflict areas that aren't designed for every user in mind. The city has tried to redesign Tremont, has tried to redesign Fordham, but everybody wants to use the space. So we've got conflict with buses, cars, pedestrians, and cyclists. That's why they're targeting those areas.
Because of the influx of, you know, cars and scooters and all of that, essentially.
Yeah, I would say that they're just roads that aren't designed for everybody. So the city has tried to design them, like Fordham, some of the slowest, and Tremont, some of the slowest buses in the city. The majority of users on those roads are bus users, but the buses are going at 4 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And so even something as simple as trying to get a dedicated bus lane is not working. And then you see all the double parked cars on those roads that aren't following the regulations and aren't getting ticketed either. It creates conflict.
Absolutely. And now tell me, what are the residents saying about this increased enforcement?
I think a lot of people are really scared and nervous. We have a delivery workforce of 100,000-ish cyclists, And like I said earlier, a criminal summons is different than a traffic violation ticket. So a criminal summons could have immigration implications because now you're in the criminal justice system,
right,
and that can trigger deportation. So people are scared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And now let's talk a little bit about food delivery workers and other riders being unfairly affected by this policy. Tell me about that.
I think I just spoke a little bit to it. I think also what we're seeing is that there's a change in the landscape. So about 10 years ago, food delivery via bicycle started gaining popularity. But back then, delivery cyclists were employed by the restaurants themselves. So I don't know if you remember, but the city passed a law where the employee had to wear a high-vis vest, a helmet, have their bike with lights, and then on the vest, it had to have some identifying number. So if you were riding recklessly, the customer, somebody on the sidewalk, could call the restaurant and say, cyclist number 001 was riding recklessly. And then the restaurant could decide what to do with their employee. If they got too many complaints, the employee could be fired. This was a really effective strategy. It also shared the consequence between the cyclist and the restaurant. So there was shared accountability between the person that was making you do the deliveries really fast and the person that was doing the deliveries. Now we've shifted and our laws really haven't caught up. So now our food delivery goes through things like Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats, and the cyclists are independent contractors. So they're not employees of these billion-dollar companies. And so the billion-dollar companies kind of just get off scot-free with how they're asking or how they're making their delivery cyclist go. We've heard reports from some of the delivery cyclists that if they're stopped for 45 seconds, they get dinged by the app companies. So if you think about the cycle of a light, if they're stopped, then suddenly they get dinged.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you for sharing that. And now let's talk a little bit about what concerns are, we spoke a little bit about what some of the concerns about this policy are. Let's talk about, in a sense, how do I phrase it? The concerns that the advocates are raising as well. What does that look like in the advocacy behind this?
I think everyone wants a safe street. We have noticed a change in landscape. I ride a regular bike, I ride an e-bike, I'm a transit girly, I love riding the train and getting to read my book. I think what we all recognize is we want just sound, sensible policy that makes sense for everyone. So if we look at our streets, even with all the improvements that we've made, are still designed primarily for cars. Right. So the light cycle, thinking just about the green lights are timed for a speed of 20 to 25 miles an hour. It's not designed for cyclists. Or if you want to make a left turn, it's not designed for cyclists. And there are improvements being made, but they're just not there. A simple improvement for pedestrians, for example, is here in the Bronx, we've got these wide roads, thinking about the Grand Concourse or Tremont or Fordham. And I'm thinking about the grandmas and other vulnerable street users that are trying to cross that huge road in the time allotted with the crosswalk, and it's simply impossible. So that's a long way of saying everybody just wants a safe street, and that starts with how our streets are designed. And right now they're designed for cars, and so we want them to be designed for pedestrians, for cyclists, for the most vulnerable road users. And if we learn to share the road, then some of these conflicts can be avoided.
Absolutely. And is the city closing a loophole, or is this going too far?
I would say it's going too far. I would say that the NYPD is just going at it alone. I think they should involve all the different stakeholders, the DOT, NYPD, the city council. I'm looking at city council saying, yeah, we have a problem, but let's get together and make a solution that works for everybody, or at least most people, right? Maybe you won't get something that works for 100% of the people 100% of the time, but treating a 60-pound bicycle harsher than a 2,000-pound car when we know that 250-ish people died last year with cars and 11 people died with all sorts of bicycles, e-bikes, acoustic bikes, and moped. That it doesn't make sense that the vehicle causing the least amount of harm is getting the harshest punishment.
Thank you for clarifying that, because at the top of the segment, I wasn't so sure on what exactly this meant. So I think through this, I definitely learned, like, okay, I definitely can see where you're coming from now. Now, in lieu of the harsher summons, what are some ways to keep the streets safe without ticketing them?
I mean, there are tickets available, right? Running a red light, you could get a ticket. One thing that we say is street design. So for pedestrians, something as simple as like raising some of the intersections makes cyclists and cars slow down when they approach an intersection because it's like a speed bump. That's a really great street design. Having medians in the middle of like when you're trying to cross a big lane. So we've seen some of that improvement on the Grand Concourse, where there's like a little pedestrian island in the middle of a really wide road, so the pedestrians can have more time to cross. That's another example of a really good street improvement. Wider lanes, so different speeds of vehicles can go. So like on my bike, I go 10 miles an hour, but like the city bike e-bikes can go 15, 18 miles an hour. So having enough safe passing, that's another great street improvement.
Absolutely. Well, Anna, thank you so much for sitting down with us this morning and talking about this.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Of course. So for more information, you can visit their website at transalt.org.